Hey, 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 welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back. Welcome back, y'all. Welcome back, y'all. We are on I've lost track of how long we've been doing this, but we're on chapter 12. Like, oh my God. There's only 14 chapters, so I only have two more chapters after this one, y'all. But we made it to chapter 12, and I just want to welcome you back to Becoming Supernatural reading series, this book by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Once again, I am Brittany. Hey, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who walks the walk and who shares what works. And if you're new here, I've been reading this book chapter by chapter for a third time, by the way. But I've been doing it here on YouTube and adding my personal reflections and real life experiences to help others integrate the work, not just learn. Because as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, it's not enough to know. We are in the era where we need to know how. We're in the era where we need to know how. And how do we know how? Through demonstration, through doing the work, through living the work, through becoming supernatural by literally being supernatural, right? So the full playlist is here on YouTube. It's also linked in my bio on TikTok, Instagram, wherever you see a profile from me, Brittany Starks. And so if you're interested, you could always come back to it. My intention is for it to become an archive of sorts as you do this work. Because again, this is my third time reading the book and I still feel like a beginner, but that's a whole nother story. At any rate, we're going to dive into chapter 12, part 4, which Dr. Joe Dispenza goes over a section called Tuning In to Higher Dimensions, the pineal gland as a transducer. And it's so interesting. But before I even dive into this part, y'all know that I share TikTok videos or little 1 to 3 minute snippets teasing what I'm talking about, teasing about the subject. So, twice this week, in talking about this subject, I had two strikes placed on my TikTok account. And thankfully, both videos, they were initially removed when I got the strike, but both videos have been restored because I submitted an appeal for both. But I used my trusted, dusted pal, ChatGPT, and I asked it what was it about these videos that caused me to get striked twice, because I've read this whole book and didn't have a problem, didn't have an issue. And twice in 1 week. And TikTok has gotten really strict, and they are cracking down on what they say could be misinformation or just community guidelines, right? And so I asked it, and it basically told me that certain words that I'm using, like the pineal gland, transducer, third eye, multiple dimensions or multidimensional, like certain words have become triggers for AI. I'm not sure if it's because as people are learning more about this stuff, it might tiptoe into territories of things that people don't really want us to know. If you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying without saying it, but you know what I'm saying. I'm not a conspiracy theorist in that way, but what I would say is some of when I went back to watch my videos, some of the language was pretty strong, and I'm someone who does not. As a trained journalist, I learned not to subscribe too hard to absolute truths because I'm starting to realize, even through learning about manifestation, that truth is subjective, no matter how you cut it, right? Your truth and my truth might be similar, but not completely the same, right? So, in that, I recognize that the language was pretty strong and definitive, and I see how it could have gotten a strike. So, I'm going to try my best to not water down my content, not water down the information I share, be authentic with it, but to be very mindful of what language I'm using. And as someone who's a communications major, I try to be very mindful of my word usage because I'm intentional that way. But I had to share that story that we're tapping into some stuff, y'all. But truth is subjective, and you know I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. If something doesn't feel right to you, don't do it. Try to use your best level of discernment as possible, because Everything that glitters is not gold, as my grandma would say. And I honestly, I'm practicing this work and I'm sharing this with other people. And as you practice this work, you will start to trust yourself more than anything and everyone outside of you, because you are starting to build an inner relationship with your inner environment, your inner beingness. And that is something that you learn to lean into as you deepen your practice with whatever work you do, hopefully. Because if anything is leading you away from yourself and putting something or someone else at the center of, the teachings, I call a red flag, because all roads should lead back to self. And later on, I'm going to share a story about a post that someone shared or commented on one of my videos that went viral on TikTok, where they were just talking about how they've tried all the things and everything just led them back to themselves. And I co-signed that message. I champion that, because if it's not leading you back to you, then where is it leading you? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So we got to have better discernment. I tend to not tune into any teachings that make something or someone the focal point outside of myself, in terms of getting to know myself better, knowing myself, learning how to work with my body and understanding how I think and that kind of thing. Like, not for the sake of, some people like to throw out the term narcissism. That's not what this is. That's not what this is. It's called being self-aware, right? Being self-aware and understanding your personal connection with the divine, not via a third party, not via some teachings, but whatever it is you're learning, whatever the teachings are, whatever the formula is, whatever the practices, the rituals are, they should be leading you deeper to understanding yourself. And if they aren't, to me, I call a red flag. And that's the only reason I share this book, because Dr. Joe is not one of those people, and we'll get there. But back to the subject. Tuning into higher dimensions, the pineal gland as a transducer. In this section, Dr. Joe introduces the idea that the pineal gland doesn't just secrete melatonin, okay? We talked about it throughout this chapter, but the pineal gland secretes melatonin, but when you do this breath that he's teaching us in parts 3, um, it can receive, your pineal gland goes from just being able to secrete melatonin to being able to receive and translate energy into mystical and multidimensional experiences. So he compares it to like your brain or your pineal gland being an antenna, like a satellite dish tuned into information beyond these 5 senses, beyond the 3D reality. And it only becomes activated when specific conditions are met, such as a deep meditative state, elevated energy, and the proper breath technique. And so he basically doubles down in parts 4 and 5 on what he taught us in parts 1 through 3, which, if you remember, he taught us about the breath. He taught us about how the pineal gland, when you breathe and you move that cerebrospinal fluid up the prana tube, and you create this pressure within the skull, right? When the fluid strikes up against the pineal gland, it creates a piezoelectric effect. That is an effect that basically creates an electromagnetic field around your body that is measurable. This isn't just woo woo, guys. This is science. They have machines that are measuring this stuff. It's not pseudo anymore. He's collecting the data at every single one of his workshops now. That's the only reason I'm tuned in. I'm tired of just being woo woo. I appreciate someone who could bring the demonstration, the data, the collected experimentation, the testing of the theories. I can appreciate that, because we've gotten enough of the other stuff. I think, at least I have, because I've been on this path for a minute. Not that I discredit, because I do trust my spiritual guidance, but I love to see that everything that I believed in spiritually is now being confirmed scientifically. So I love that for humanity. But he explains how when this pressure from the spinal fluid during the breath process strikes the pineal gland, which contains piezoelectric crystals, the pressure and activation can release powerful chemicals that are melatonin derivatives, but he calls it like supercharged melatonin. And these chemicals are anti-cancerous, anti-inflammatory, anti-degenerative, and so much more. Go back to the chapter to read the list of everything that he listed as to what the melatonin becomes when this breath is introduced and strikes up against the pineal gland, that cerebral spinal fluid, that it creates DMT like substances. And DMT is the main component of psychedelics. And one of the most powerful psychedelics on the planet is ayahuasca. And that is a plant medicine that people take when they want to have these experiences, except this is all happening naturally in the body through this process that Dr. Joe teaches. And it facilitates profound inner visions and emotional breakthroughs. And people experience mystical experiences at his workshops, some even at home when they don't go to the workshops. He shared testimonials from people who've done both the workshops and had mystical experiences, or were at home and had mystical experiences. And a lot of them did practice the breath, but you don't have to do this to have a mystical experience. You don't have to do this. And I'll tell you why, because I personally have been practicing the breath more so lately because I've been reading this chapter of the book. But during the meditation of the pineal gland, because I do the breath with the pineal gland meditation, and also the reconditioning the body to a new mind meditation, which also has the breath in it. There are moments where instead of trying to figure things out, I felt, let me rephrase it. There are moments where I felt super, super peaceful, super, super calm. Whatever thoughts were bothering me prior to my meditation were an afterthought, because the oneness that I felt, the calmness that I felt, the coherence that I was experiencing is almost so intense and so noticeable that it just feels like home. It feels like, oh my God, like I can relax. And I do this meditation, especially when I'm having a rough patch in my day or something is just on my heart emotionally. Like I said, my life is not perfect. I have things that are happening all the time. And I feel like the divine somehow, some way gives the best students the hardest lessons. And when I tell you, baby, everything that I'm practicing in this work, I get to demonstrate every day. And I sometimes wish I did not have to. But every time I do this breath in whatever meditation I decide to do, reconditioning the body to a new mind, the pineal gland meditation, or just to do it in general, I know that breathing helps regulate the nervous system. I know that. I've been practicing that for a while. But with this breath, because it's so intense, I feel instantaneous resolution. That's the only way I could really explain it. And I realize I don't need to force change. I just need to tune into it from within. Like it's like my entire body is listening to a frequency that I never noticed before. Like, oh, that's available to me. Like, even though all hell seems to be breaking loose out there, if I just tune into this, I can feel calm right now. Like, that's how it feels for me. So, that's what Dr. Joe means when he says the body becomes a receptor for the divine. Like when you practice it, you get to see what's possible for your body to experience. But if you're just living day to day and you're in a constant state of stress, a constant state of fight or flight, because you're constantly tuned into your problems, you're constantly being triggered by the same dynamics with people and circumstances, then your body doesn't know that it can feel safe. Right. And this is why a lot of us experience chronic illness or chronic pain and just uncomfortable conditions in our bodies is because we didn't know that we were existing in such a way. I didn't know I had chronic anxiety. I was never diagnosed with it. But coming into this work and just learning about my nervous system, I have now a language to use to describe experiences that I've had for years to be chronic anxiety. I lived in a constant state of anxiousness, and I attracted people who were equally anxious at work, in relationships with friends and family. Like, it wasn't until I grew aware of this pattern within myself and then came across the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, which gave me a formula to practice, to experiment with. Because as he always says, this is an experiment at best. This is not an end all be all. It's an experiment. So once I came across into the works of Dr. Joe and I started practicing, I started understanding I have options. I don't have to exist this way. I don't have to feel stuck. I don't have to feel like I'm afraid to exist in my body, because that's what it started to feel like. Like I would experience these patterns of anxiousness. I knew what they were, but I could not stop them, as I've shared in many of my other lives. Like it was a pattern that I grew aware of and I didn't know how to fix it. And I wasn't about to take medication because I knew I wasn't crazy. I just needed the right information. And lo and behold, the way this worked fell into my lap literally for free. The way it fell into my experience. And I always tell people, if this work crosses your timeline, it's for you. Consider it a gift, because everybody doesn't get this information. Everybody doesn't. But if you get it, you are being tapped by the divine very lovingly, very gently, not by force, to say, hey, there's something here for you. And if you learn it and if you demonstrate it, you will influence so many around you to believe in possibility as well. And that's exactly what happened with me, is happening with me. That's why I show up here. That's why I'm believing in possibility of, my gifts making way for me, making room for me. My intention is to retire from having to work a 9 to 5 ever. And I'm intentionally saying this on video because I feel like this is going to age very well. I have every intention to retire and have my gifts and my divine energy make room for me, make way for me. I'm talking about abundance upon abundance. I'm talking about generationally. I'm talking about so much freedom, so much peace, calm, so much to give because I have so much love. This is what I speak into existence for me. And this is what I speak into existence for you. And if you resonate with that, put some hearts in the comment section, because why not? Why not us? Right? Why not you? So I had a question that came in that said, someone says, how do I know if my pineal gland is actually activating during meditation? So for me, I would say you, it's not about being perfect, right? Like Dr. Joe always says that it's not about dramatic visuals. Sometimes it's just a felt sense of tingling, some pressure you might feel at your crown, right? Or the back of your head about where the pineal gland is. Sometimes it's feeling lighter. Sometimes it's a sudden clarity or peace and calm, like what I said I experienced when I practiced this meditation. If you feel deeply connected, if you are emotionally moved, or you experience any kind of spontaneous peace, that's often a sign that your body is tuning into higher frequencies. So if you want to measure it by anything, measure it by that. Like, do you feel any kind of difference in your emotional state? Do you feel any kind of difference in your physical state? Because if you do, then that should be your parameter. Not am I doing it right or wrong, but am I improving through doing this process? Right? Like that's what I like to measure by. And I also will highly recommend you do not ever compare yourself to other people. I know we watch the stories of transformation and people are explaining what happens to them in meditation. That's cool. But you need to learn you. The sole purpose of all of this work is for you to get to better understand and know yourself, and to thine own self be true. So stick to what works for you, what feels good to you, what feels good in terms of you stretching yourself, trying something different. Don't compare it to me. Don't compare it to anybody. This all of this work is pointing you back to self. It's pointing you back to source, right? And the minute you start comparing, you're giving your power away, and you're taking away the very purpose of you coming into this work is to learn yourself and have a better connection with a better direct connection with your source. And so don't get into judging yourself or whether or not you're doing it right or wrong, or just if it feels better, if you feel a difference, go by that. I hope that helps. The next question, someone says, do I need to do the breath technique perfectly for this to work? I'm already shaking my head. Not even finished the question. No one does it perfectly in the beginning, right? Like I don't know what it is about our society, but we feel like the minute we learn something new, we should know it. And that's not true. Like, remember when you had to put training wheels on your bicycle? We got to be okay with being a beginner, right? Like if you're going to try anything new, if you're going to manifest newness in your life, you got to be okay with being a beginner in some ways or in all ways, right? Because new means you haven't experienced it yet. You don't really know it as well yet. You haven't practiced it enough yet. And then when you start to grow confident with it, it's because you practiced it, right? So no one does it perfectly in the beginning. The key is just consistency. So if you keep showing up, keep giving it a shot. Stop judging yourself, stop comparing yourself, but keep doing your best, whatever that means for you in those moments. Start where you are, build the rhythm, be consistent. And Dr. Joe even says that the intention and focus are just as powerful as the breath itself. So there are people who have these experiences, these mystical experiences, and they never do the breath. They don't even practice that meditation, because he says if you can be super focused and clear on your intention